Many cheaters cry out for help. They themselves do not understand what they are doing and what risk they are putting their marriage at. As a rule, they think about the consequences after terrible events. No matter how sad it sounds, my wife needed help, but it was hard for me to help someone who betrayed me. I wanted to understand why she betrayed me. I lay on our bed, enveloped in a sensual haze, when the garage door suddenly rumbled to life. "Damn it!" I exclaimed. Springing to my feet, I glanced at the clock. 10:45. No, she couldn't be back so soon. Oh no, 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 no. I surveyed our bedroom, the scattered rose petals, the half-empty champagne, and wondered if my entire world was about to collapse. As an architect, I'd been flying solo for about a year. I'd been putting in insane hours because, with just one client, my entire staff consisted of me, myself, and I. My makeshift office was in an old gas station. I'd attempted a home office, but I found myself taking too many breaks to spend time with Judy and our twin girls. They were unexpected, born just 9 weeks before I graduated from the University of Texas 6 years ago, but they brought us immense joy. We both desired a large family, but complications arose during childbirth, preventing her from conceiving again. We attempted fertility treatments, and though doctors were optimistic about new techniques, we postponed them due to costs when I began my own venture. Judy cared for our daughters while I established my office. Money was tight, so she selflessly took a job as an executive assistant at an oil company. She found the hours accommodating for a working mother, starting at 9 and finishing by 3 most days. However, Fridays meant an early start for a 7:10 a.m. flight to Dallas for her boss's weekly meetings. The airport was a hectic 20-minute drive from our home, or 30 if following the speed limit. The days grew longer when the meetings extended due to her boss's promotion, causing them to miss flights and incur premiums, eventually settling on a late-night flight that arrived at 9:55 p.m. in Midland. Judy often didn't return until close to 11. I wasn't pleased about it, but seeing Judy never complain, I kept quiet. Tonight was supposed to be filled with joy and intimate moments, but now it seemed like everything was about to fall apart. I glanced anxiously at the clock once more. 10:45. No, she couldn't be home yet. I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the garage. Why was she arriving now, the exact time she would if her flight had been on schedule? But I knew it wasn't, because unusually I had checked on her flight. I'd wanted everything to be perfectly timed for her arrival. In a confused haze, I glanced around the room again. I saw the bowl of rose petals I had planned to scatter across the bedspread, the champagne chilling in the ice bucket, rented from the liquor store. My mind went to the caramelized pecan apple pie from Heb, baking in the oven for an hour now. It was Judy's favorite dessert, and one of the few things I could make. I had even picked up HHEB's 1905 vanilla ice cream to go with it. For a fleeting moment, I felt disheartened that she had unintentionally disrupted my surprise for her. Today was a significant day for us. I had just found out that my first architectural design had won a Frank Lloyd Wright Prize. For an architect, it's akin to winning the Nobel Prize. I had debated revealing the news at a family dinner, but I wanted to share it with Judy alone, to kickstart a romantic weekend before we dove back into the less glamorous world of fertility treatments. With the opportunities the prize would bring, we could now afford the best. I hoped Judy would be thrilled. So my parents had taken the twins on one of their weekend RV trips for sightseeing. I had mentioned to them that I had big news to share when we all went out for dinner on Sunday night. I heard the garage door closing, but it was too early for Judy to be home. My long-held suspicions suddenly intensified, assaulting both my mind and my emotions. Despite my gut feeling that she might be having an affair, my heart stubbornly refused to accept it. What did I really know? I asked myself. Recently, Judy had developed a habit of heading straight to the hot tub as soon as she came home on Fridays, coinciding with her late flights. She didn't even bother to change into a swimsuit. She called it her mama's come-down time, a phrase that now seemed like a crude pun. Judy had always been clever with words. Since the late flight started, we hadn't made love on Friday nights when she returned. She claimed she was too tired from work. Yet before the late flights, when she arrived just a couple of hours earlier, she would practically pounce on me after returning from Dallas. If I hadn't been so pleasantly surprised, I might have confronted her about it. Before these late flights, she was rarely the initiator of intimacy, barely a handful of times in our entire relationship. But now, for over a month, she hardly waited until the girls were asleep. After she began working late-night shifts, everything changed. It never happened again. She remained affectionate as always when we were intimate, except on Fridays. Perhaps it made sense after her long 18-hour days. But her conversations about work shifted too. Our social life changed. Initially, we often attended gatherings with her colleagues, and she would praise her boss endlessly. I used to feel jealous hearing about his remarkable business skills or his resemblance to Sean Connery in his prime. Then, about 3 or 4 months ago, she stopped talking about him, and we stopped seeing her coworkers. I admit I was relieved. My own busy schedule left me too tired for socializing. Now I suspected there was a darker reason for her change. As I mulled over these thoughts, the most unsettling realization hit me. I couldn't recall the last time she said she loved me or gave me one of her affectionate kisses on the cheek or hugs. Judy had always been demonstrative, but not anymore, at least not with me. I froze, denying the creeping suspicion. Judy, my Judy, who taught me the difference between lovemaking and mere physicality, the woman I cherished, couldn't possibly be coming home after being with someone else. The thought threatened to overwhelm me. Then I heard her call out, "Matt, where are you? I'm so glad to be home." Her voice sounded normal, but it didn't match the unsettling image in my mind. I shook my head in disbelief. It couldn't be true, not Judy. I may have taken the wrong flight. Or maybe the plane was somehow late. In 3 quick steps, I reached the computer in our bedroom. I pressed the escape key to delete the screensaver and clicked refresh. Her flight number was displayed on the screen with updated data. The plane will land in only half an hour. Looking back at our rumpled bed where I was lying, for a moment I wanted to run away. I wanted to go into denial, but I'm not like that. The question was asked openly and demanded an answer. I hurried down the stairs, my mouth moving, but I couldn't say a word. Only a guttural sound escaped from my throat. By the time I got to the enclosed porch, Judy had already taken off her blouse. I came up behind her and hugged her. "Matt, please, you know how tired I'll be when I get back. Let me rest until tomorrow," she said. "No, Matt, maybe later." "No, Matt." Writhing with amazing strength, she broke free and screamed, "Damn it! I said no!" She stood panting from the strain and looked at me. I moved towards her. My intentions were clear. Her eyes widened, and in a low voice that made me freeze in place, she said, "No, Matt, not like that. I won't let you find out that way." I don't think I had fully grasped what I was doing until that moment. Those 13 words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was completely stunned, like a bull in a slaughterhouse. It was like I was in a state of medical shock. As I looked at her, I felt nothing. I couldn't comprehend it. My world had just shattered, yet I felt numb. I was eerily calm. I tried to feel something, anything, but there was nothing there. In a voice so calm it hardly seemed like my own, I asked, "You wouldn't do this unless you loved him? Did you ever love me?" Her expression softened. "I did love you. I never intended for this to happen. I never wanted any of this. I never imagined it would turn out like this. I'll always..." I didn't want to hear any more. I interrupted her. "Are you going to marry him?" There was a tense silence. I stared at her, waiting for an answer. She nervously bit her lip. It's something that's been discussed. He's been pushing me to decide. I'm so confused, I just haven't been able to. Once again, I cut her off. Please have the decency to go back to his place. I've just pieced together this whole mess because your flight hasn't even landed yet. I need time alone to think about all of this. Judy stepped towards me, her face filled with pity, wanting to embrace me as she said, "Oh, Matt, I'm so sorry. I wish none of this had ever happened. Let me explain. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." I stepped back, feeling as fragile as if I were made of the most delicate cut glass crystal. I knew that even the slightest touch from her could shatter me irreparably. Another step back, my hand extended to halt her. "Please, just take what you need and go. Mom and Dad have taken the girls out and won't be reachable until Sunday evening. We'll talk on Sunday afternoon. I don't want to see or hear from you until then." Tremors ran through me. Somewhere in my mind, a distant part wondered if it was rage, fear, or a heart attack. She gazed at me, her eyes pleading, about to speak when I interrupted firmly. "No!" A flicker of fear crossed her face. She sighed and headed to our bedroom. Numbness enveloped me. I went to the den, sank heavily into my recliner, and wondered how long this gray emptiness in my mind would endure. I lost track of time before she returned. Her expression was wistful, yet tinged with a sorrow I'd only seen when she was told she could never have another child. "Matt, I saw what you had planned. I didn't mean to ruin it. If you want—" Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. The betrayal. She was offering me a pity gesture, a second-rate consolation prize. I started to rise from my chair. She saw my expression, sobbed, and fled. She must have sat in her car for a while, because several minutes passed before I heard the garage door open and close. As soon as I heard the garage door shut, I slumped back into my chair, and the colorless void descended once more. I couldn't tell how long I sat there, my mind blank, before sleep finally overtook me. I woke up in a fury after a vivid dream where Judy was in bed with her boss. It wasn't just reckless intimacy, it was tender love. My entire body ached as I got up from my chair, every joint protesting. But I was consumed by a new kind of anger. I stormed back to our bedroom. Our bedroom. There was no us anymore, no our. In a red haze, I grabbed a champagne bottle from the cooler and smashed anything breakable until I stood over a delicate Dresden figurine of a young woman in a pale blue ball gown, holding a fawn. It was Judy's only inheritance from her grandmother. Despite wanting to destroy the 6-inch-high china doll, I couldn't. Surveying the room, I had demolished it all, yet it brought me no relief. I looked at the champagne bottle in my hand, amazed it hadn't shattered. Without thinking, I ripped off the wrapping, untied the cork, and popped it open with a loud noise. The bubbly sprayed out, just like in movies. I was never a wine connoisseur, but as a child, I had once read about the Rothschild family. I had promised myself that if I ever made it big, I'd celebrate with one of the world's most expensive champagnes, Chateau Lafite, Rothschild Pauillac. Drinking straight from the heavy glass bottle, I vowed never to touch the stuff again. It tasted awful. It didn't even help me sleep. Exhaustion did, and thankfully, I didn't dream. I woke up a few hours later with the first rays of the sun coming through the window. Whatever anger I was feeling dissipated, leaving me numb inside. I tried to evoke emotions, anger, sadness, but I couldn't find anything. I knew my marriage was over, but my mind struggled to come to terms with it, instead sinking into memories. Judy and I met when I was studying at the University of Texas. She attended Southwestern University at Georgetown and played soccer on their Div 3 team. I played club football at the University of Utah and put together a team to participate in a futsal tournament on the fields of SU. Judy came over to look and caught my eye. I made a fool of myself trying to impress her. We haven't even made progress in the tournament that we won a year earlier and that we will win a year later." Judy, bless her, pretended not to notice anything. From that day on, we became inseparable. Driving 26.8 miles up and down the I-35, we burned enough gasoline to replenish the strategic reserve. But who cared? I was her first boyfriend in terms of betting. In high school, I had a girlfriend who I was close to 73 times before we broke up. Yes, I did, because I couldn't imagine that I wouldn't be able to keep track of something so important. As for Judy, I realized that we were destined to get married when I lost count of our lovemaking, the first weekend we spent together. It happened in a cozy room at the Four Seasons Hotel near the airport after the spring ball of her sorority on Friday evening. However, ironically, we didn't make love that Friday night. When we were getting ready, Judy changed her mind. She said she couldn't continue without constant commitment. Without any outerwear, I knelt down and proposed to Judy. She was in her underwear, wrapped in a sheet, and accepted my offer, but insisted on the ring. I spent the night on the floor. As soon as the Americas Diamond opened next to the Highland Mall, we went there and I bought a ring that I hoped she would always cherish. Back in our room, we exchanged vows before God, and I put the ring on her finger. After that, the miracle happened. But the miracle ended very quickly, literally in a couple of seconds, because I couldn't help myself. Judy remained silent, but her puzzled expression said a lot. I blushed. It shouldn't have been like this, but I was too excited. I've wanted you for so long, and I felt so good with you that I couldn't help myself. I promise that next time everything will be much better. Although Judy couldn't completely hide her disappointment, her words were kind. We have enough time to fix everything, and practice allows us to achieve perfection. Are you ready to try again? I didn't have the courage or the heart to admit that I needed more than a few minutes to recover. Instead, I said, I would love to, but I have only one means of protection left. I mentally added, I need to run to the pharmacy and buy more. Judy looked at me skeptically, considering that we had booked a room for 2 nights. But thank God she didn't say anything. I'll get myself cleaned up quickly and I'll be back soon, I assured her. And finally, we did it. We got married during the Christmas holidays that followed. We lived in Round Rock, and we both graduated from university a year later. I wasn't inconsiderate either. Despite the fact that I worked hard, she never talked about feeling lonely or needing more of my time. Do you know the phrase, I worshiped the earth she walked on? It was me. When we built our house, I returned to Georgetown and brought the grass mat from their football field where I first saw it. I bought enough of the same grass for our yard, but I planted this little litter first. Our bed life was perfect, like in a dream. I pursed my lips, searching for answers in our shared history, but found none. As I brewed a cup of Twining's China black tea, I made another attempt to stir up some emotion, perhaps even pain. Yet I remained numb. I could manufacture artificial feelings, but genuine emotions eluded me. My subconscious seemed to understand that I wasn't ready to confront the pain, nor did I have the energy for the rage I had felt earlier. Moreover, I needed to maintain composure if I were to salvage anything from the emotional wreckage Judy had left me in. The realization that our marriage was over hit me when I discovered her infidelity. Last night, as I wrecked the bedroom, my aim was to hurt and punish her. Waking up this morning to find her closet obliterated, with shredded underwear and torn clothes strewn about, was a surprise. It hadn't occurred to me until then that I'd grabbed my fish fillet knife from the tackle box in a fit of rage. That memory evoked images of a childhood friend and sent chills down my spine. Determined to avoid dwelling on that disturbing recollection, I focused on piecing together what I knew about Judy's affair. She had mentioned considering marriage with him. I puzzled over why this idea didn't cause me anguish. The thought of Judy in another man's arms, fully clothed, repelled me, yet the prospect of her marrying him didn't seem to affect me at all. I was sinking deeper into this thought with the same frightening detachment. Deep down, I believed that Judy still loved me with all her heart. I was convinced that if I made an effort, I could regain her affection. I was familiar with all her reasons, and I had the advantage of knowing about Gemini and her strong moral principles. I understood how guilty she must have felt, and, to be honest, how susceptible Judy was to manipulation. Then my thoughts turned to the man she was in a relationship with. I knew a little about her boss, James Capote. In his early 40s, he had been divorced from his second wife for more than 5 years, and he had 2 children, a son who graduated from Midland Lee High School and a daughter who was 2 years younger. According to Judy, he constantly sought to spend more time with them, although he had custody only once every 2 weekends and on alternating holidays. He didn't even have children in the summer. I met him a few times shortly after Judy started working, but not once in the last 3 or 4 months. I didn't like him from the very beginning. He had a wandering look. Although I could understand his attraction to Judy, it was hard for me to believe that Judy could really fall in love with him. Instead of dwelling on what-if scenarios or questioning my past actions, I opted to research the divorce laws in Texas on my computer. I found out that in Texas, a divorce can be finalized in as little as 60 days after filing. The decree needed to be read in open court, but neither party had to be present if uncontested. The sooner this process concluded, the better, I reasoned. I discovered printable forms available for a fee, which I promptly paid. I dedicated hours to strategizing my desired settlement terms and how to approach Judy to agree to them. Ultimately, I concluded that my priority was securing the best outcome for my daughters. Though I considered canceling credit cards and emptying bank accounts in frustration with Judy, I ultimately believed she wouldn't resort to such actions against me or our children, despite my current feelings towards her. I desired to keep the house, so the girls wouldn't have to relocate. We had used up all our home equity to fund my business startup, which had only amounted to about $10,000. Winning the prize would allow me to borrow the additional funds needed to buy out Judy. I believed that with the award, my business would skyrocket in value. I didn't want her, or that jerk Capote, to lay claim to any of it. This urgency spurred me to act swiftly. The prize wouldn't be publicly announced until the grand banquet in 3 months held in New York City. I had insider information, enabling me to plan ahead, something I wouldn't have done otherwise. This was yet another reason to settle things quickly. To achieve this, I knew I had to offer a fair settlement. I struggled between wanting to erase all reminders of our life together and minimizing disruptions for the girls. Eventually, I decided to bring in an appraiser to value everything we owned, even the items I had damaged. In addition to half of our property, I offered to replace any destroyed items. Our division of assets would proceed by alternately choosing items until each of us reached half the total value. I spent the day sorting out the practicalities of ending our relationship, jotting down details on the forms I had purchased. By evening, I believed I had a plan that would work for me and hopefully Judy too. I realized I hadn't eaten all day, and the idea of food made me queasy. Still, I knew I needed to keep up my strength to accomplish my goals. Lacking confidence in my cooking abilities, I pondered what kind of meal would complement the process of separating our lives. I settled on ordering pizza. As I ate, my thoughts returned to how I could inflict pain on Judy, how to make her feel as hurt as I did. I knew the emotional anguish would be overwhelming once I moved past denial. But how could I make her understand that pain too? Leaving me wouldn't hurt her like it hurt me. She was leaving for someone else, while I would be left alone. There seemed to be nothing I could do to truly break her heart. Yet, despite my denial and despite the betrayal I felt, I couldn't imagine not loving her. After much internal debate and justification, I realized it wasn't up to me to decide whether to keep her or let her go. She had made that decision when she chose to be with Capote. Having a wife do that was something I couldn't accept, period. If it wasn't my decision whether she stayed or left, what was the best outcome I could reasonably hope for? Then it struck me. A perfect solution. But I had to question if I could actually carry it out. Judy had always deferred to my preferences. It used to frustrate me that she wouldn't assert herself, even over small things like where to eat. She might complain later about my choice, but she never voiced her own opinion unless pressed. Could I leverage this to influence her actions? Ultimately, the decision would be hers. Yet I felt confident. While I didn't know her as well as I should, I understood the pressures she responded to and how to apply them. Late into the night, I strategized meticulously. This required a delicate approach. Judy called just after 8. I paused to gather myself before answering. Judy, you've made your choice. Unintentionally, you've made it for both of us. Now the question is how this will impact the girls. Divorce is tough on kids, especially ones their age. The real question is, do you want a battle, or shall we strive to make this as smooth as possible for them? Matt, please let me speak. I'm sorry for hurting you. I love you. I don't want you to hate me. I never expected it to come to this. But I was on the brink when I heard the word love. Judy, every time I hear your voice, it just intensifies my disdain for you and what you've done. Do you understand the impact this regrettable affair will have on our twins? We're trying to raise them with principles and ethics. How do we explain to them that you have renounced the most solemn oath a human being can take for the sake of casual intimacy? Judy was crying as yeah, it's not like that, Oh, really? Even after months, you still hadn't decided to marry him. How do you think that will sound to the girls? I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. Then I continued. I'm sorry. I managed to get in touch with my parents and ask them to keep the girls a little longer. If you agree, I'll have them brought here at 5 and we can break the news together. Otherwise, I'll do it alone. I'll be civil while we talk to the girls, but after that, I don't want to hear your voice until we're divorced. I'm trying very hard not to say what's on my mind. You'll always be the mother of my children, and we'll have to discuss them. Just don't test me right now. Matt, I never meant to hurt you. Yeah, I know. It just happened. Let's get through this as quickly as possible. I'll cover an apartment for you. I just hope you're not planning to move in with your guy unless you get married. That would complicate things even more. I paused, calming my racing heart. I want to shield the girls from as much of this mess as possible. It's your call. You're in charge. Can I come over now and talk? No. Please, Matt. I don't want it to be like this. I interrupted her sharply. Our marriage ended the moment you slept with him, I declared in my strongest voice. I sighed dramatically. Whatever your reasons were, they ended it. So let's bury it as gracefully as we can. Pausing for effect, I added in a wistful tone, I genuinely hope you'll marry him. Not just for the girls. I think it'll make things easier for me, too. I don't want to believe you ended our marriage just for some passion. Then, I let the silence hang. Finally, Judy slumped and replied, Okay, Matt, if that's what you want, I'll do it your way. If there's a hell, I've experienced it. The detachment stayed, or I believe I would have succumbed to the agony I saw in my young daughters when Judy initiated the, You need to understand that your daddy and I love you very much, but sometimes adults make mistakes. Conversation. She continued for several minutes, using euphemisms the girls couldn't grasp. Finally, I spoke as gently as possible. Your mommy has fallen in love with another man and now wants to marry him. I agreed. So we will need to get a divorce. The moment the words left my lips, I knew I would have given anything not to have said them. A verse by Omar Khayyam that I had learned in high school echoed in my mind, and I struggled to hold back tears. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. Nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. In the 10 centuries since he wrote that, nothing has changed. My entire world was confined to their 2 precious faces. I couldn't even see the rest of their bodies, just 2 little masks of pain. I was barely older than them when a friend's father, a teammate's father, murdered his wife and then took his own life in their living room. His little sister and my friend had hidden in their room as their parents shouted at each other. The last thing he remembered hearing before the gunshots was his father shouting, "They're better off with dead parents than this." There was a bitter custody battle involving his grandparents, and despite his father's family fighting hard, his mother's parents from another state emerged victorious. That was the last time I saw him, but in that moment, I understood the pain his father must have felt. It took all my willpower not to reach for my gun and end Judy's life. I had never felt such intense hatred before. I thought I had, but witnessing what it did to my daughters showed me a new depth of loathing. I'm sure other things were said. The girls asked questions, and Judy must have answered, but I couldn't hear anything. All I knew was that I held two sobbing treasures in my arms. Finally, a question broke through. "But Mommy, why don't you love Daddy anymore?" I blinked, and the world regained its color. Before me stood a figure that seemed inhuman, bearing the agony etched across Judy's face. Her expression was a twisted mix of pain and an attempt to show love to our daughters. "Mommy still loves Daddy. She will always love Daddy," I intervened. "You won't understand until you're older, but Mommy had to make a choice, and she chose him. Sometimes people love more than one person, but you can only be married to one. Mommy needs to be with Mr. Capote, but we'll do our best to make this easy for you. Mr. Capote will love you very much, and I will always be your daddy. You're gaining one more person to love you, just like Mommy is." Carrie, always the more expressive of the twins, wriggled out of my embrace, darted towards her mother, and began to strike Judy with all her might. Lori followed moments later, wielding a long brass kaleidoscope from the coffee table. Her first blow cut Judy's forehead just above her left eye. I pulled Lori away but made no move to assist Judy. Instead, in a chillingly calm voice, I said, "You've upset the girls. It's best if you leave. I'll inform the captain when you can retrieve your things." Judy stood there, blood streaming from her eye, and headed to the kitchen for ice and paper towels. When she returned a few minutes later, both girls had their arms around me, crying. Judy began to speak, but I cut her off. "Will you be staying with the captain, or do you prefer the girls to only contact you on your cell?" Her face, now free of makeup and with a swelling eye, betrayed no emotion as she replied, "I've been with him the past 2 nights. I haven't told them yet. I thought we'd discuss it together." Cutting her off again, I said, "Girls, go to your room, please. Your mother and I need to talk alone." Once they had left, I continued, "As much as I respect and care for the captain, he's your father. You should tell him alone. And I imagine you'll want to start planning the wedding." Taking a breath, I added, "I have a packet of legal papers ready. Take them. It outlines how we'll divide our assets and settle everything. I'll agree to nearly anything you want, except custody of the girls and your use of my name. I'll consider that if you marry Capote soon after this is finalized. I want this over as soon as possible, 60 days from Monday. I got upset earlier, but if you agree, we can meet with our lawyer in the morning to work out an arrangement. I'm sure your boss will give you the day off, and I want the papers filed by tomorrow night. If we can do that, I promise to support your relationship with the girls. I'll never tell them, the captain, or anyone else, what really happened." Judy seemed about to say something, tears welling up, but instead she silently turned and walked out the door. After finally getting the girls to sleep, I settled into my chair. I buried my face in my hands and whispered in, "The captain? Oh God, this is going to devastate him. I'm so sorry this had to happen to him. He doesn't deserve this." Judy's father had retired as a naval officer, though he never embraced the title of admiral. His last command had been aboard one of the super aircraft carriers. A mishap during a landing, when he was in the back seat with a rookie pilot, had left him paralyzed from the waist down. Despite his disability, I never saw him as handicapped. He lived his life in a wheelchair and had to use a catheter. Judy, their first child born just before the accident, was very late in coming. Judy's mother had passed away from cancer when Judy was still in junior high, and the captain had raised her on his own. I've never known a finer man. He was as much a father to me as my own, perhaps even more so. No, that's not fair. My father was a good man, but his career as a petroleum engineer and geologist kept him away from home most of the time. And though he did his best, we were never close. But with the captain, it was different. I always said I could never leave Judy unless he left her too. He was the first man I truly looked up to, who treated me like a grown-up. Judy and I still had nearly 2 years of school when we got married. I knew I was probably too young, but the captain brought out the best in me. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, he was the most commanding man I'd ever known, and, well, I could talk endlessly about how much he meant to me and the impact he had on my life. I took a deep breath, glanced at the clock, and briefly tried to convince myself it was too late to call him. He picked up on the second ring. "Son, first off, let me assure you that I'm on your side. She's my daughter and I love her dearly, but I'm astounded by her actions. I understand she's confused, but..." Our conversation stretched on. He recounted issues he'd witnessed in the Navy, where wives sometimes strayed when their husbands were away for extended periods. He never outright suggested that these marriages always ended well, but his implications were clear. Despite my eagerness, I respected him too much to cut him off. Eventually, he came to his point. "I've reviewed your situation. Is there any chance that if I beat some sense into that foolish woman, you'd consider giving her another chance?" I couldn't help but smile at the captain's exaggeration. We had discussed the challenge of disciplining our daughters before. A chill settled in my chest, and I worried briefly about heart trouble. "No, sir. Captain, I'm sorry, but this wasn't a one-time mistake. I never understood how someone could harm their spouse until now. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to forgive her, but even if I couldn't live with her." I sighed. I hadn't wanted to say those words, especially aloud to the captain, but I couldn't mislead him. "Moreover, sir, even if I could forgive her, we've talked and she loves him. I couldn't live with that, not even for the sake of our daughters." The captain spoke softly. "Son, she's in a tough spot right now if you give it some time. She told me they were discussing marriage. I had no idea, and they were already talking about marriage. I know I was working long hours, but I can't excuse this. I want her to marry the guy, and we'll both accept it. I've promised not to complain about her. Captain, our marriage is over, but I think it's best if the twins don't grow up believing their mother threw away our marriage for a fleeting affair." There was a long pause. "She didn't tell me that. Son, are you sure this is what you want? Do you want to pressure her into this marriage?" I spoke firmly. "Judy and I will always be connected through the twins. Right now, I have no respect for her. If she gets married, at least she's trying to do the right thing. Who knows, maybe years from now, we'll see this differently." The captain interrupted. "If she marries him, it's going to be difficult, and it will strain our relationship, yours and mine. You'll always be the girl's grandfather, and I'll always be their father. I'll let you decide how much more you're comfortable with, but I won't back down from what we have." I heard the captain sigh. Then he said, "This is tough, but we'll go with your plan. She's made her decision. I suppose we'll have to see how she likes it, but you know my stance on this. I don't believe two wrongs make a right." I've lost count of how many times I've heard variations of the phrase, hard heart. Throughout our conversation, I could feel my own heart changing. There wasn't a literal voice in my head, but I sensed I was crossing a line, one that turned my heart into something resembling hardened steel. "I understand, sir, but I don't see another choice. I can't take her back now and face myself in the mirror. As much as I loved Judy, I refused to be a weak husband. Even if I wanted to, What kind of example would that set for my daughters? Judy ended our marriage. The sooner we make it official, the better. The sooner we move past this, the sooner we can start to build our future. If I hadn't known the captain, I might have mistaken tears in his voice. Son, I'll urge her to accept your offer, to settle this tomorrow. Just promise me we'll keep talking, that you won't shut me out, no matter how bad it gets. Please promise me that. His voice broke. My own voice was rough when I replied, You have my word, sir. There was a weighty silence, and I heard the captain choke out what might have been a goodbye. I couldn't trust myself to even say that. I knew his pain surpassed mine. He loved us both. I hung up the phone, and despite my efforts, no tears came. I didn't like who I was in that moment, and I blamed Judy for making me feel this way. 3 months later, I sat alone at a table towards the rear of the vast auditorium. When I went up to collect my prize, they announced that I was the youngest person ever to receive the award. At 28, I was 7 years younger than the previous record holder. I stood, delivered an acceptance speech, trying not to betray the bitter taste in my mouth. Yet, I couldn't shake the memories of those days after I found out I had won. Captain had visited the lawyer's office that Monday morning. Whenever Judy hesitated over a clause, he pressured her into a fair compromise. By noon, we were done, and the papers were filed before the courthouse shut. 61 days later, the judge announced our divorce in court. A week after that, Judy became Mrs. James Capote. It stung, and the girls cried the entire week they were on their honeymoon. As I flew home, I finally realized what I had lost. I was the most sought-after architect in the world. Clients were eager to secure my services, yet here I was, alone on a plane. I had my daughters, my parents, but, despite slaying the mammoth, I had no mate to share the triumph with. When I arrived home, my phone was bombarded with calls from potential clients. The only one I picked up was from the captain. He said all the right things to uplift me, expressing how proud he was of me. Then, in a soft voice, he asked, "When did you find out?" When I told him, he let out a curse, the kind only a former Navy man could muster. After he regained his composure, he said, "That's awful, really awful." Then, more gently, he added, "I know what it's like to be knocked down by life. Words can't fix it, but I'm here for you." He paused for a long moment before continuing. "Son, there's nothing I can do to make it better. But if you feel like getting out and about, either I'll watch the girls or we can go together. My treat." "Thank you, Captain. If you can avoid mentioning her, I'd love to hang out tonight." I did spend the evening with the captain, but that week felt like the loneliest of my life. 2 years after the divorce. Once again, I found myself in New York celebrating a professional triumph. This year's banquet saw my collection of Frank Lloyd Wright prizes grow to 4. Last year, I won for a home design, and this year, I achieved an unprecedented three-peat with another home. The 4th prize recognized a commercial building I designed for Midland, sending the architecture world into a frenzy. I also made history by being the first to win in 2 distinct categories in the same year. Yet, despite these accolades, I sat alone at a table surrounded by strangers, feeling more lonely than ever before. Why was I lonely? It wasn't because I lacked contact with people. I had to get an unlisted home phone due to incessant calls from potential clients worldwide at all hours. My travels kept me away more than I had planned, but when I was home, I was fully present. I built an office extension to my house and avoided my downtown office whenever possible. When I was home, I made sure not to work while the girls were out of school. Except for the month Judy had them, our summer was one continuous adventure. Yes, some of it involved scouting potential construction sites, but the girls loved exploring new places, and I always aimed to design structures that harmonized with their surroundings. Why was I lonely? It wasn't because of a lack of attention from women. I hadn't dated much, but women from around the globe called, offering companionship and sympathy after hearing about my broken heart during what should have been my greatest triumph. Perhaps my newfound wealth, flowing faster than the mint could print money, added to their interest. Unfortunately, despite external success and attention, I didn't like myself, not even a little bit. I couldn't allow myself to like, let alone fall in love with someone else until it happened. I hadn't chosen to remain celibate. I could have been intimate as much as I wanted. The issue was finding someone with whom I could truly connect, someone I could love deeply. My own insecurities held me back. I struggled to respect any woman who showed interest in me. Instead of accepting responsibility, I convinced myself that trust was the problem. I believed I couldn't trust anyone enough to introduce them to my children. Divorce is honestly awful. As an adult, I didn't find it enjoyable, but as a parent, it was devastating to see how it affected my beautiful daughters. They never spoke negatively about their mother, but would occasionally mention things about their stepfather and his children. They never detailed more than arguments with their step-siblings, but I knew it must have been tough for them. I tortured myself, imagining how hostile that household might be for them. I had just returned from New York on a red-eye flight and was trying to relax in my armchair when the phone rang. The captain got straight to the point. "Son, that guy has put her in the hospital again. He started beating her right after you got him fired, and now she's hospitalized. You need to get her out of there before he kills her. Even if you won't do it for Judy, think about the twins. They shouldn't witness their mother being treated like a punching bag." Panic gripped me. "Where are the girls?" "Don't worry, they're safe. They spent the night at their friend Laura's place, and I had your parents pick them up. They left immediately and should bring them to you on Sunday evening." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Why don't you come over so we can discuss this? This is the first I'm hearing about him hitting her. Why would she put up with that?" "You know why. Don't play dumb." "You ought to." "No. We pressured her into that marriage. If she didn't realize then that you were out for payback, she figured it out soon enough. She's so guilty about what she did that she'd accept anything, even his abuse." I clenched my teeth. I couldn't deceive myself, let alone the captain. "I never thought it would go this far. You knew he was trouble. What did you think he'd do when he found out you were behind his firing and the harassment charges?" I swallowed hard. "I guess I assumed he wouldn't stoop to—" "Come over, Captain, and we'll figure this out, I promise." There was a prolonged silence, broken only by the captain's resolute voice. "This needs to end. No one messes with my child like this. Judy made me promise not to act hastily last time. I might be confined to this chair, but this has got to stop." "Sure, Captain, I apologize. For your sake. I never imagined it would escalate like this. I'll be there in about an hour and a half. I'm stopping by the hospital to see if I can persuade Judy. Damn him, God damn him to hell." He hung up and a chill ran down my spine. His last words weren't just a curse, but a heartfelt damnation. In his 60s, and not in the best health, the captain had never been one to ignore an injustice. As I waited, thoughts of my recent vengeance consumed me. After the divorce, I'd agonized for days, weeks, searching for a way to get back at Capote. But I couldn't think of anything that wouldn't hurt me more than him. I was fit, but he was nearly 20 years older and still close to his college football weight. I might land a surprise blow, but even if he didn't press charges, I doubted I could win in a fight without dedicating years to something like karate. Time I didn't have. I checked Texas laws. I couldn't sue for alienation of affection. Judy may have a molestation case, but not me. For a year and a half, I carried the burden of not seeking revenge, like an unextractable splinter. Then fate intervened. The CEO of Capote's company unexpectedly ran into me at a charity event in Midland, despite living in New York City. It turned out he had heard about my recent FLW Public Building Award and proposed that I design a large office building for them in Midland. I agreed to a meeting, and presented a computer image of a design I had been refining for years. But then, I made a decision. I confessed that while I would eagerly design for almost any other company, I couldn't bring myself to work for his. No amount of money could sway me, not after what his company had allowed to happen with my ex-wife, Capote. Naturally, in such a large company, he had never heard of Capote or the details of my past. He didn't take my refusal well. A few weeks later, Capote was fired due to harassment allegations. The CEO called to express his gratitude, revealing that Capote had a history of such behavior spanning many years. He had reopened recent cases and uncovered new evidence, which provided the grounds for Capote's dismissal. A week later, we finalized a contract. Professionally, I was soaring, having secured a significant project. Yet, despite this success, I feared my personal life was headed for another setback, especially after the CEO's call. When the captain finally arrived, well over an hour late, he breezed into the house without offering any explanation for his delay. Ignoring any pleasantries or coffee, he launched into his concerns. "Jesus, son, she's a wreck. They'll have her in the hospital for at least a week. Damn it, they only kept me for 3 days after my 6-day bypass." He was visibly shaken, and I couldn't help but notice how it mirrored his paralysis. It added to the poignancy of the moment. After about 90 seconds of silence, he still hadn't regained his composure. "I can't stand by this. I supported everything you did for her because I believed she deserved it. But she doesn't deserve this, and you need to put an end to it." "How can I stop it, Captain? She's not my wife. I have no authority. All she can do is divorce him or press charges." The captain's voice carried a commanding authority I had never witnessed before. In that moment, I empathized with how one of his junior officers must have felt when they erred on his carrier. "Don't attempt to deceive me. I was there. I supported you. Damn it. You were aware of your actions. You wanted her to experience the pain of betrayal from someone she loved, and you ensured she did. I care for you, but you're as calculating as anyone I've known. You would have excelled as a fighter-bomber pilot. You execute your plans with precision, devoid of emotion. You knew what you aimed to achieve with Judy, and you succeeded. But please, for God's sake, tell me this wasn't your intention." I almost instinctively denied it, but the seriousness in his gaze silenced me. I bowed my head. "Yes, Captain. I knew what I was doing. I knew that a man who cheats once will likely do so again. Once a cheater, always a cheater." Raising my eyes to meet his, I expected anger or sternness. Yet his expression revealed a hint of what might have been compassion. I swallowed hard and continued. "I didn't think she would stay with him. Midland is a small town in many respects, and I thought by revealing his infidelity, she would divorce him." He interrupted me. "Were you planning to take her back?" "No, Captain. I loved Judy, but I couldn't stay with someone who didn't love me or chose someone else. I might have forgiven her for cheating, but not for falling in love with someone else. I know I manipulated her into marrying him, using our daughters, you, and her own sense of morality to push her into a marriage I was certain wouldn't last 6 months. I wanted to hurt her, but I trailed off. I wanted to say I didn't want her to be hurt like this, but I wasn't entirely sure I meant it. I was sorry for the captain's sake, but damn it, she made her bed, and I was relieved it was uncomfortable." The captain stared at me intently. I tried to convince her to leave him when I saw her at the hospital, but she wouldn't listen. "You're the only one who can make her leave. You sentenced her to this. You're the only one who can change it. Isn't it time you showed her some mercy?" After a moment of silence, the captain continued. "Honestly, this hasn't gone the way I expected. I thought that after she learned her lesson, repented, and came back begging on her knees, you would take her back. I've never seen anyone as devoted to her as you were. I still believe that if she leaves him, you would take her back. But I don't understand why you think she stopped loving you." "I asked her that night," I replied. She said, "I did love you," not, "I do love you." She spoke in the past tense, and that's when I knew there was no hope. It was a feeble answer to his question, but it was the best I could muster. The captain erupted. "That's all? Just the tense of one word." Regaining his composure, he fixed me with a stern gaze. "No, you should have known better than that. It's high time you realized what this has done to her." His voice had been loud, then abruptly quieted as he regained control. With a swift turn towards the door that reminded me of a motorcycle doing a wheelie, he hurried towards the front. "Wait here, I need something from the car," he said before pivoting back towards me. With a commanding tone I hadn't heard before, he ordered, "No, you do it. In the passenger seat of my car, there's a brown paper grocery sack with some books. Bring them here." Normally resistant to such directives, I retrieved the sack and presented it to him. He instructed me to place it on the table. "Did you know Judy kept a journal?" When I shook my head, he continued, "Neither did I, until I got to the hospital. I raged at her about divorce. But she wouldn't listen. After I calmed down a bit, I asked what provoked the beating. She said he'd bought a new journal and found hers. He demanded she give him her old ones, but she refused. Anyone could see she was terrified of what he might do if he found them. When I offered to pick them up for safekeeping, she eagerly agreed. She made me promise not to read them until she told me where they were hidden. I also promised not to let my friend, who came along, read them. He glanced at his chair. I couldn't reach her hiding spot. She had them stashed in the attic under the insulation, so I took a friend. I had her write a note giving me permission to retrieve them. I brought along a friend's son, a police officer in uniform, and we went over there. Capote glared at us the whole time but didn't interfere. The place was a mess. Kyle climbed into the attic, and when he came back down, I retrieved her latest journal. She had cut out the center of a cookbook. I haven't read them, and I know Kyle didn't either. I did not promise not to give them to you, and you did not promise not to read them, he said, pausing to fix me with a penetrating stare. "Look, son, I couldn't love you more if you were my own flesh and blood. Judy has her faults, but she's not a liar." He paused again, noticing my expression, and continued, "Not telling you about her affair is a form of deception, but we both know if you had asked her directly, she would have been honest with you. Nevertheless, what's in those journals is her inner dialogue. It will be the unfiltered truth, you know that. I want you to read them. Understand why she made the choices she did. We both know it wasn't because she fell in love with that jerk." He paused once more, rubbing his chin. "I can't force you to forgive her, but they say, to understand all is to forgive all. Maybe if you know more. Well, if you can't forgive, maybe, for God's sake, have mercy on her. Please." The captain departed, leaving me alone with the stack of journals. However, my thoughts were elsewhere, lingering on his final words. He had mentioned mercy twice. He had said that Judy was at my mercy. I wasn't comfortable with that notion, and I struggled to grasp its meaning. I turned to my computer and pulled up the American Heritage Dictionary to look up the definition of mercy. The dictionary offered 4 definitions, starting with the most common. 1. Compassionate treatment, especially towards those under one's power. Clemency. 2. A disposition to be kind and forgiving, a heart filled with mercy. 3. Something to be grateful for, a blessing. It was a mercy that no one was injured. 4. Easing of distress, relief. Providing food to the homeless was an act of mercy. Angrily, I closed the dictionary and attempted to justify my actions towards Judy. I had simply given her what she desired. I had merely assisted her in making a moral decision to marry another man. But I couldn't complete that thought. Yes, it was her choice and her responsibility. Yet, I had pressured her. What's worse, I was aware of the power I held over her. Even throughout our divorce proceedings, I knew she was willing to do anything to atone for the pain she had caused me, and I had shamelessly exploited that. I certainly wasn't in any mood to show kindness or forgiveness. I reflected on that. It was true, but who did I still want to punish? Judy or Capote? I had destroyed his career. No one would hire a man for a managerial role with a 15-year gap in his resume. Even if he mentioned his last job, any background check would uncover that he was fired for repeated harassment, resulting in legal settlements. Who would take such a risk? Currently, he was working in a convenience store, fortunate to have that. It was a far cry from his 6-figure salary, yet I realized I still felt justice hadn't been served. I wished he would be killed in a robbery. In a sudden realization, I understood that in my mind, justice would never be served as long as he had Judy. I might not desire her myself, but he certainly didn't deserve her, especially after he started abusing her. I didn't believe the third definition of mercy applied in this situation, but what about the fourth? Did I have any inclination to alleviate Judy's suffering? I didn't think so, and that realization didn't paint a flattering picture of me. In fact, it left me feeling somewhat ashamed. I attempted to recall anything I could about mercy, and one phrase came to mind. The quality of mercy be not strained. I had no clue what it meant or its origin, so I searched it online. Here's what I discovered. Origin from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Portia. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. It is an attribute to God himself. And earthly power doth then show likest God's when mercy seasons justice. However, this revelation didn't ease my mind. I still felt exhausted. Although it was just past noon, my body clock told me it was the dead of night. The indoor air was sweltering, matching the scorching heat outside, typical for Midland in late July. I retreated to my room, collapsed onto my bed, and drifted into a dream-filled sleep, indifferent to whatever visions might unfold. When I awoke, it was 4:30 a.m. I found myself repeating the phrase, "To understand all is to forgive all." In the thick darkness before dawn, I pondered its truth. If I truly understood, could I forgive? And if so, what would that forgiveness entail? I had promised myself I wouldn't delve into her journals, but now I felt a need for answers. Initially, my intention was simply to see what she had written about the affair. The challenge was that she rarely dated her entries with the year and only occasionally noted the month. Instead, she used the day of the week. It was evident that she wasn't writing for an audience, not even for herself. This was her way of grappling with the events of her life. Once I started reading, I couldn't put it down. Here lay the essence of the woman I loved more deeply than I had ever imagined possible. I might have despised what she had done, indeed I did. But this was the core of the person for whom I would have faced 100 dragons to protect. I chose a book, opened it, and started reading. It's over. The cavalry did not appear from behind the hill. The hero did not appear on time. Matt didn't cancel the wedding. As I stood at the altar and my daughters cried in their tiny bridesmaid dresses, the words rang out, "Does anyone here have a reason?" And Matt didn't burst into the church to save me. I said those words, and this time I won't break them. What a stupid fantasy. I didn't even realize until this morning that I was hoping for salvation. So, why would anyone else? Now I'm really in trouble. I think it started to sink in with the sunrise. There was really no reason to expect James to make love to me. He had never done this before. At least he finally stopped bullying Matt while he was sleeping with me. I didn't like it, and last night I warned him that if he didn't stop, I would start talking about how much I admired Matt. I just wish I'd done it the first time he made fun of Matt. When he finally ran out of strength, and began to snore. I ran into the bathroom and sobbed there for over an hour. James is playing golf now. What kind of man would play golf alone on his honeymoon? The kind of man who wants me to say, "Do it, James." He doesn't need a nickname or affectionate treatment, just a very formal James. I swear I will never do that again. Oh, Matt, why did you make me marry him? But I know that, don't I? I saw your face that Friday night, and a big part of me died. Nevertheless, I kept hoping, praying that you would change your mind about this relationship that I am now doomed to. Would anything change if I could explain it to you? But how could I explain what I don't understand? How could I resist all his not-too-subtle hints that my job depended on him being happy, and then passively obey him when he told me to have a drink in his apartment? Why was I trying so hard to hide what was happening from Matt? He would have put an end to it, he would have saved me. But for the last month, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to be saved, was I? Did I really start loving James, or did I convince myself of this in order to justify my actions in front of the man I truly loved? Well, if I believed that I loved him, then over the past 2 months, he has completely destroyed this opinion, constantly bragging about how he beat me away from a young man, flaunting me like some kind of stupid trophy. Oh my God, that's who I am. I'm his 28-year-old trophy wife. It's his way of feeling younger when he's approaching 50. Oh my God, what have I done? Who can save me now? As I continued reading, a few things became increasingly apparent. Firstly, Judy had a subservient personality, not exactly submissive, but highly inclined to yield her will to those she perceived as powerful. She viewed Capote in this light, and he seemed adept at exploiting this tendency. Secondly, I hadn't fully grasped the depth of her pain over not having more children. She feared I had used my business as an excuse and had given up entirely after we stopped fertility treatments. She felt devastated and resentful, emotions I hadn't fully comprehended. Her depression likely made her more vulnerable to someone like Capote. However, this doesn't absolve her of responsibility for her affair. She made the choice to submit to Capote, as her journal clearly reveals. She knew the risks when she engaged with him intimately. She felt guilt-ridden and aware of her wrongdoing. Though she never fully understood her motives, nearly every journal entry reflected her remorse over her perceived weakness. She discovered other surprises. She realized I was attempting to punish her by arranging her marriage to Capote after catching him cheating. Upon reflection, she concluded she deserved this punishment. Rather than protest, she wrote extensively about the agony, not her own, but a newfound visceral understanding of how she had hurt me. After the initial incident, she scarcely mentioned it again. While she disliked it and feared the possibility of contracting a disease, she was indifferent to his choice of partners. Then, I came across the troubling part of her story. It pained me to read her straightforward account of his mistreatment. Added too much sugar to his coffee, hard punch in the stomach, bruised my hip when I hit the floor. This occurred within 3 months of their marriage. She never dramatized these incidents. She accepted his abuse as a deserved consequence of her actions towards me. What truly devastated her was every suspicion that I might have been with someone else. She poured out her emotions over the first occasion she was certain I had slept with another woman. Ironically, she was mistaken about that woman. We never did sleep together, though I had been with someone else before then. My recent strained relationship, as well as pressure from Capote, pushed her to the idea of harming herself. Pressure from Capote manifested itself in 2 forms. He wanted her to undergo infertility treatment, for which his parents offered to pay, and he wanted something more in terms of bedding. She came up with various excuses to evade both requests, primarily because she did not want a child from him and refused to do what she did not do with her ex-husband, whom she still called my husband, 2 years after their divorce. She never used that term in relation to Capote. When I finished the last entry in my diary, I felt empty. I went back to bed and fell asleep. One of the advantages of owning your own design company was the freedom to choose the time to work. I have given instructions that no one should disturb me at home unless there is an emergency. For the next 2 days, as I expected, no one called. By the end of this period, my decision remained unresolved. James Capote was in serious trouble, even though he didn't know it. I was wondering how to deal with him. The only uncertainty was whether he would survive as a result. I was thinking about contacting people involved in construction-related crimes. Although I wouldn't let them on my construction sites, even bandits appreciated beautiful houses. My house design fees have now reached 7 figures, which is a bargain considering the recent sales. A failed robbery. However, the conversation with Capote could wait. What couldn't wait was Judy. She would be released from the hospital soon, and although I was not sure of my intentions towards her, I was determined that she would not return to their shared home, even putting aside personal feelings. The thought of the twins living with Capote filled me with horror. I've been trying to convince myself of that all along. However, whenever I thought about doing something, I couldn't get rid of the image of Judy when she cheated on me and made fun of me with her lover. Arguments continued to ring in my head. For all the reasons I could find to show mercy, I could find equally good reasons not to. While these thoughts were spinning in my head, I turned on the news on TV to distract myself. The TV company was reporting on another horrific incident in the Middle East. I clenched my teeth and lowered my head. Early on the morning of the 3rd day, full of determination, but still not sure what exactly I intended to do, I went to the hospital. When I entered her room, she was still asleep. I stood by her bed and studied her face. It was covered with terrible purple bruises, which had now acquired an unpleasant green-brown hue. I've never seen anyone get beaten up so badly. As I leaned over to see the other side of her face, tears unknowingly streamed down my cheeks. I'll never know if it was one of my tears that fell on her, or my stifled sob that roused her. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a fleeting moment she smiled at me. Then, as she became aware of her surroundings, she let out a small shriek and pulled the sheet over her head. "Judy, we need to talk. I've seen everything, and if we try to communicate through that sheet, we'll both feel like characters from a bad movie." She made a noise that was somewhere between a chuckle and a snort, but lowered the sheet. Though she smiled, the warmth didn't reach her eyes. "Dad told me he gave you my journals. He had no right to do that, and I'm sorry he did. I was pretty upset, but then I realized I never wanted to hide anything from you. If you had asked, I would have given them to you. I can't remember everything I wrote, but I would appreciate it if you could tidy them up before you ever let the girls read them." I grinned and said, "I would never let them see what you think of our years of dating." When I met her gaze, her eyes were wide open, which allowed me to look into her soul. I've always dreamed of seeing her body. The thought of her showing it to Capote was my worst nightmare. But what she was revealing to me now was too vulnerable. No one should ever be so defenseless in front of another person. In a low voice, almost a whisper, she said, "I would like to explain why I did it. I didn't want. Actually, I didn't want to, but I did it. I don't blame you for divorcing me or forcing me to marry James. That's what I deserve. But I need you to know that I will do everything to reduce the pain I have caused you." She paused to blow her nose, which turned into a snort. Looking confused, she continued, "I can't even say that I didn't realize how much it would hurt you when you found out. I thought it would end after that first time. When it went on, I didn't know what to think. My love for you has never waned, but I think I wanted you to save me. As strange as it sounds, I was disappointed that you didn't do it. I made hints, but you didn't react in any way. I've always wondered if you suspected anything before that night." I gritted my teeth. "No, I didn't do that. I trusted you completely. If you had told me that the sun rises in the west, I would have called the McDonald Observatory in the Davis Mountains to demand an explanation, and would have argued with them if they denied it. She took a deep breath, held it, then slowly released it. I never should have been put on that pedestal. I could live differently. She paused, a habit of hers, and changed direction. Where do we go from here? I gave her a half smile. She knew these sudden shifts in conversation always threw me off. I admired her quick thinking, but disliked having to struggle to keep up. Firstly, you can't go back to his house. Ever. That's non-negotiable. She tilted her head, giving me a look like a teacher would give a slow student. That's not an option. I married him, for better or worse. Unfortunately, it's been mostly worse. I felt my temper rising. Judy, going back is not an option. Pretend I'm the knight on a white horse here to rescue you. You are not going back. For the first time, confusion flickered across her face. You read that in my journal, didn't you? I swore I'd never break my vows again. You know that too. I interrupted firmly. He's the one who broke every vow. He cheated on you. He didn't love and cherish you. He destroyed this marriage, not you. You are not bound to him. She blinked back tears, indecision evident. If I go back, you won't let me see the girls again. I can't risk him hurting them too. She broke down, head in her hands, and cried. I sat beside her on the bed, holding her. When she realized what I was doing, she clung to me, soaking my shirt with tears. When she cried out, she asked, Where will I go? What will I do? I'll help you, and I'll make sure he can't hurt you, I said. I'll have my lawyer prepare divorce papers and restraining orders. If I bring them to you this afternoon, will you sign them? Without lifting her head, Judy nodded against my chest. That afternoon, my lawyer and 2 of his secretaries arrived at Judy's place. He had her sign the documents, and his secretaries witnessed them. Once everything was completed, he rushed to file them before the courthouse closed, leaving me alone with Judy. She took my hand, pressed it against her tear-stained cheek. Then, with her eyes shimmering, she asked, Once this is all over, will you take me back? There it was, the question I had dreaded. I recalled a realization I had while watching the news. War, by its very nature, was brutal and inhumane. Yet, unless it was to be a war of total annihilation, there had to be room for peace. Showing mercy didn't equate to surrender. It meant preserving some humanity and allowing the enemy to do the same. Now was the time to show mercy to Judy. I did my best. 5 years later, I found myself in the maternity ward waiting room. Judy was being transferred from her labor room to the delivery room, expecting another pair of twins, this time boys. Sitting beside me was a nervous first-time father, and as we chatted, the nurse announced that Judy was prepared. Mark stood, shook my hand, and said, Thanks for coming. It's going to be a challenging couple of months, isn't it? I smiled. Yes, and the girls are already getting restless. I'll try to have them over at my place as much as possible, but I'll have my hands full too. He nodded nervously and left to join Judy during her delivery. Mark was a solid guy, a major in the Army Reserves and a captain in the Midland Fire Department. He earned a Silver Star in Afghanistan and a second Purple Heart in Iraq. I admired him. He was a perfect match for Judy, and I was happy they had found each other. But what about me? How had I responded to Judy's question 5 years ago? I had tried to show compassion. No, Judy, I won't, I had said. Her face fell and tears welled up once more. After she composed herself, she looked me in the eye and asked, Why? I wanted to respond with, Because I want a wife I can admire, not one I have to control to keep faithful. But instead, Shakespeare's gentle rain from heaven softened my bitterness. All right, I did say something like that, but I aimed for compassion. I said, I understand us better now than when we were married. We're just not compatible. It doesn't mean either of us is bad, but you need someone who can give you direction, and that's not me. I'm too self-absorbed. You'll always hold a special place in my heart as the mother of our twins. No, that's not true either. You'll always be my first love, but we're not meant for each other. We've both made mistakes, but maybe as friends we can help each other make better choices. Mark was the right fit for Judy. He didn't keep her on a leash. It was more like the tether used by mountain climbers. They brought out the best in each other, and Judy, secure in her relationship, flourished in a way she never had with me. Mark and Judy lived in the same school district as me, so our twins could ride their bikes between our houses. While we didn't socialize much, we supported each other. If we disagreed, we'd consult a mediator, and the girls never knew. The twins jokingly complained about having too many parental figures, but deep down they adored Mark and were thrilled to have new brothers. A lot of new siblings. You see, I wasn't at the hospital to support either Mark or Judy. We weren't that close. It was one of those unexpected twists of fate. I was there to visit my wife and our newborn twin boys who had arrived the day before. Happily ever after? Perhaps. Mercy doesn't mean letting others escape consequences entirely, just reducing them to what they deserve. For Judy, it meant I didn't have to punish her as severely as I could have. Taking her back wouldn't have been mercy. It would have been something else. I met my wife through a friend of Judy's, and we were the ideal couple everyone admired. I hold her in high regard, and she keeps my ego in check. She adores my daughters, and they adore her. If Judy hadn't betrayed me, we might still be married. It might have been better for the twins, but not for me. Perhaps we married too young. Perhaps we settled for each other as suitable partners without waiting for perfection. Perhaps we hadn't finished maturing, and we both changed as we grew older. All I know for certain is that I have never been, nor could I ever be, as happy with Judy as I am with my wife. Extending mercy to Capote was more challenging. Ultimately, I decided that having to work for a man like him at nearly minimum wage was punishment enough. He was already a broken man. I didn't need to break his body, too. Admittedly, the jail time I ensured he served for the assault may have influenced my decision. I did have reason to reach out to him about a year ago, though. Despite being warned, a very foolish woman insisted on opening her heart to this man. I'll never understand why some people act so foolishly. When I learned about his wedding, I felt such pity for that foolish woman that I confided in a client. As luck would have it, this client's cousin's friend happened to be involved in high-risk personal loans. When this cousin heard about the situation, he was moved by compassion and sent one of his associates to speak with Capote, gently reminding him that good men don't harm women. I heard that the lesson didn't need to be repeated. It's valuable to have connections in unexpected places. Yes, I'll admit that I still have much to learn, and a long way to go before anyone might consider me merciful. But when it comes to withholding mercy, it binds you to the person or the issue. It also goes against your better instincts. I couldn't forgive myself for what I did to Judy, but when I showed her mercy, I found that I could forgive myself too. That broke the steel barrier around my heart and opened it to the possibility of a happy ending.